Hello, it's Eve. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to take you through the process of creating the Rowan tool roll sewing pattern. It's a pattern that I created for myself for my art supplies for when I'm out and about, but actually I use the desk version frequently at home with my sewing tools in as well. So it's a very versatile sewing pattern. I think you're going to enjoy it, and this is how you make it.
The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to mark out all of the lines on the pattern that you want to include for your slots and back pockets. So I'm actually making the version that has the split pockets within the facing. I'm omitting this line because I want to be able to fit a sketchbook in there to show you how it works. And I'm also not including the two slot pockets here because I want to be able to put my pencil case there. So that's this job done. I've also marked in the zipper section, and you'll notice that on this side I have the corresponding lines marked in as well. So make sure that you've done that before you even think about sewing a stitch. I just point out the difference in size between this flap, which is the lower section of the main piece. Okay, this is the main piece. This is the wrong side of the fabric. This is the right side of the fabric, and you can see it's a lot bigger than the pocket insert. So this is the part that's going to form space, a palette, a sketchbook, anything else. And then this folds over the top and it gets sewn down. But you can see each end is longer than the space it should join to. And that's because I noticed that there wasn't quite enough space. You really had to force it. Although waxed cotton does kind of like loosen a bit, it didn't loosen enough for me to really get my two pencils in comfortably. So I've just added a little bit of space to this section, just a couple of millimeters, just to allow that to happen. So you're going to want to mark in all the back pockets that you definitely want. Here you can see a mark. It's an optional mark. So this could be sewn down later on to create a separate pocket here. So I could have brush pens here, different pens here, but I've actually left this one open because it will fit a sketchbook in there if I leave it open. So these longer ones are the ones that get sewn after, and these ones get sewn first, but I'm going to show you that process next. So this is where the pocket, the zippered pocket, will be. You can see I've already marked it out here on the wrong side. The next step is to cut through along this straight line in the center and these little triangles. We're going to cut to, not through. If you're not using a fabric like this is a waxed cotton. If you're not using a waxed cotton but something that's more likely to fray, you will probably want to interface this section first. And there are instructions within the instructions on the size that you need. So pop a bit of interfacing there. You could also pop a bit on the corners, one here and one here. I've just cut mine in because I was a bit hasty. And then when this is folded back in later on at a later stage, you can see that zipper. The zip is then on the sides, and your zip opening, your zipper pull will be here, so that when you're wearing it, you can just pull it down, put your hand in and pull it back up. We need to finish the top edge of the pocket insert and the bottom edge. Bottom edge can just be turned over 1 centimeter. Top edge can also be turned over 1 centimeter. Then we're just going to top stitch along. Make sure that your top stitching thread is on the top and a complementary or any other thread in your bobbin underneath. We're also going to do the same for this lower section that turns up. We're going to turn this over 0.5 centimeters, so half a centimeter, 5 millimeters, and here, but we are only sewing along here and along here. We're going to leave this there because that extended line, that's where we're going to sew later. I've used my seam gauge at 0.5 and I've turned under this line. I've also turned under this one because I want to capture it in this seam. Well, it's not a seam, but, and then this one is 0.5 as well. And I'm going to sew from the right side straight down here, straight down here. As you can see, the top section has been stitched in place. I'm using a really nice top stitching thread, and now I need to repeat it for the lower edge as well. So I've cut the slit opening for the zipper. This will be an exposed zipper. I've pressed down the seam allowance 0.5 centimeters. I actually extended the length. You can see originally I had space for an 18 centimeter zipper, but I don't have an 18 centimeter zipper. I have a 20 centimeter zipper, so I've just extended it a bit. And then it's a case of popping this on top. You might want to put down some like fabric glue or something to hold it in place, make sure it's fully lined. You could also use like double-sided masking tape, things like that. I'm going to pin mine from the right side and then I will top stitch that in place. So you can see that I've got my zipper inserted and pinned into position. I've also added these little tabs at the end. So this one is sitting just below the actual zip stop, just to add a little bit of accent color, and again at the top as well. And I've just used a bit of the selvage of the ripstop just to basically make it a little bit prettier. So that's now ready to sew. and we are now sewing the top or the upper edge of the like the front section of the tool wrap. I also top stitched along these two folded edges as per my earlier instructions. I've also added a label. This is from Kylie and the Machines, and I have put in my zipper. I did have a fail here. The top stitching thread ran out. I don't know if I'm going to unpick it and do it again. At this point, no, but we'll see. Okay, this is the buckle tab. You're going to want, on here I've got a 0.5 centimeters, but actually I think I've made it up to 1 centimeter on this. But once these have sewn along this edge, you're going to press it, if your fabric allows, press it open, turn it through, and then you'll want that seam to be in the middle, but I'll show you that. And this distance here should be 2.5 centimeters, just shy, or just under 1 inch, and that's to feed through your buckle. So we have these two tabs ready to turn through. I do use one of these bodkin type things, which has a slider to tighten it in order to pull it through. It is complicated because this is a thicker fabric. If you would rather not create a tunnel, you can always just fold it and top stitch it instead. The next thing to do is, well, we're going to attach a ring to this, but you might want to top stitch along these sides first. It's up to you depending on what kind of aesthetic you want. This is the belt strap. If you're only making view A, then yours will be half as long as this. I'm making view B for this one, which is the belt version. So mine is substantially longer. It's twice the size, twice the length. I've pinned it. We're going to sew along this edge and possibly along the top edge, I'm not sure yet. And then we'll turn it through and top stitch it if desired. I'm now going to sew the strap so that that's done. And I'm just going to sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance on the open non-folded longer edge. And we're going to repeat it for the strap as well. This is going to be more complicated because it is longer, but again, if you don't want to be pulling things through, you can actually top stitch. So these are the upper facing pieces for view C, which is the one that has a stitch line here. They overlap to create slot pockets. I've chosen to use a Liberty ripstop fabric for mine because it's so vibrant and beautiful. You could use any kind of fabric. You could use the same if you wanted to. Just be mindful that if you do use a thicker fabric for your main and your facing, it's going to end up a bit bulky. This is a slot pocket. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn under 1 centimeter, so 0.5 and 0.5, and on this edge, and we're also going to turn under 0.5, but we're not going to sew this one. These two we'll sew, and that will finish them off. And then we can overlap the notches. Let me turn this over so you can see it properly. Okay, we have a notch here and a notch here, and those are the overlaps. So once the seam allowance has been turned and sewn, those overlap, the top on top of the bottom, and then you create a slot opening that you could put in like a wet like a towel for your brushes, tissues, you could put a small palette, all sorts of things. Okay, you can see I'm folding under 0.5 and then 0.5 again to finish the top edge. I had to think then what it was. So it's the top edge of the lower facing piece, and I'll do the same again for the lower edge of the upper facing piece. Okay, these are the upper and lower facing pieces, and I've pinned them in place. I'm going to sew those as well now so that those are finished, and then they can be tacked together at the notches, and I will show you that. Okay, so the next step is to sew the 5mm by 5mm rolled hem on both of the pocket facing sections, the slot pockets. So I'm doing that now. I've got a black thread in the bobbin side, and a lilac on the top because there's a kind of like pinky lilac in this ripstop fabric. This is what it looks like. You can see that the ripstop fabric is a really tricky to sew. It's nylon. It slips at the beginning, so I've got a wonky start, but that will be caught in the seam allowance, so I'm not too worried. But the rest of it is pretty neat. The bobbin thread did try to, the top thread did try to come through, but it's okay. I'm fine with that. And the last thing to do is to actually, now that I've shown you how this works on the facing, is to overlap where those notches are. You can see there's one here and one here, and you want to overlap those. We're going to put this one on top and pin them in place and then baste them. This is really slippy, so it just keeps moving out of the way. But baste along that edge to secure it within the seam allowance, and then we can attach that to the actual main fabric. So we do have everything marked in for the top pocket flap slot pocket facing section. As you can see, this is the part that goes here, and this is the part that overlaps. There are notches, and then it gets sewn down here. So you've got two very kind of like useful little slot pockets that you can put in a rag to wipe your brush on, or you know, something else that's not essential but nice to have. I now have my facing sewn in place, as you can see. And now I need to trim along here and turn it through, and then we'll top stitch it in place. You can see I've got the mark here where we're going to stitch through to create the 2 separate pockets, so I will show you that as well. So you can see I'm sewing along it. I don't have any guidelines, and it's likely that the underside is going to be not perfect because of the way my machine works with the bobbin thread, but I'm just sewing along that top section, well, it's technically the lower section, to create the pockets. I feel it's important to talk about the hardware needed for the Rowan art roll. Of course, this pattern can be used for other tools, not just art supplies. It's just that I'm purposefully making this one for my art supplies. So because I've got a metal toothed zipper, I have a metal toothed zipper. It's a really good quality zipper. I have opted to use the hardware that is the same color. So I have a slider and I have 2 O-rings. Now that suits my needs. If I had a suitable zipper, I would probably be using the D-rings that I have here and this, I don't even know what this one is called, a non-slider. Let's call it that because this one does have a slider. And I would probably be using this one with this attached to the end of the strap because I think it's quite funky and it's a pewter color. Those are probably what I would be using. I also have this buckle. A buckle is easy enough to add on if you know what you're doing with 2 hands and not one. So you could also use a buckle as well. Lots of different options for hardware. It's essential that you do have something like tabs, I'm calling these, to attach them, and you'll want a strap. Now I've included a strap that is a specific length for the belt version, but the go-to, if you're not sure whether it's going to be long enough, literally measure your waist where you're likely to wear it and cut a piece of fabric that's as long as that. Double, because obviously you're going to want to make it so that it's like a tube, and wide enough to fit through the hardware that you've chosen. So this fits around my waist perfectly, but obviously I'm going to have the length of the art roll as well, so that means I have some play to like tighten it if I need to. Now the slider has a gap, as you can see, so I'm just going to feed my tab through, cover that gap. Again, one-handed is really tricky. I should have got my tripod out. And that is how it's going to sit. And that is going to fit here. Okay, so I'll attach that and show you. On the opposite side, we've got 2 positions. We have a position here, which is for the version I'm making, which will be the belt version. Further down, there are other notches, which I haven't put in because I didn't want to confuse myself. And if you're not making the belt version, that is where your D-rings or O-rings are going to go. So mine's going to go here. I'm going to also actually add on my belt. I've just realized that's not this step because first of all we need to insert the pocket insert, so I'll do that next. So this is where you might feel it's a little bit tricky, and what we're going to do is pop the insert down. This is the pocket insert, and we want to line up with the lines underneath. So we want to bring it all the way down so that those pencil lines, the ones that are drawn in, they match up. Okay, and at the top as well, we just want everything to be aligned, and then I'll show you the next step. The fabric will bubble up once you have aligned the left and the right hand sides of the main piece with the insert, and that's because I allowed extra space for whatever's going to be put into these top upper level slots. So don't panic that it doesn't align perfectly, it was never designed to. Okay, so I've got these marked in. Don't worry about it being a little bit like bubbly, it's fine. This is happening because the fabric here has been extended outwards and now we're bringing it in. So it's going to end up being slightly off grain, but it's okay because that's actually going to allow the fabric to loosen up a little bit more so you can get things into these slots. So don't panic, it's all okay. Just make sure you're pinning the guidelines that you marked in, and we're going to sew along those guidelines now as well. I do just want to point out we're not sewing all the way through, we're only sewing the insert to these lines, not this section here, that happens afterwards. I've sewn in place all of the shorter slots, the ones that don't go through to the back section. Now I'm going to pull all these threads through to the reverse, tie them in knots and then cut them. My pockets are still bubbling, which is great. The downside is I should have properly pinned them all because you can see I've got a slight slope. This is straight. I'm not quite sure what I did wrong here to make it slopey. I think I had aligned this incorrectly with the wrong notch. so it's a bit late to fix it without undoing several of these. So I might just leave it because sometimes it's okay to make mistakes. I have pinned in, ignore this, I undid this section because it didn't fully catch, so I'm going to resew that in a moment. But I've pinned in the seam allowance for the zippered pocket. I've turned it back and I'm going to sew from this corner along, capturing the zipper tabs and the actual tab with the slider on the inside. So I will put on my one-sided zipper foot to do that. And then I've also pinned the lower edge as well, and I'm going to sew exactly the same thing and make sure I capture the zip tape in that 1 centimeter seam allowance. I am going to be mindful not to sew these sections, like we don't want these caught in yet. Okay, we can see the bubbles and everything's been trimmed. I've also sewn the lower edge of the pocket, the zippered pocket, and the top edge. I did go over it a few times here, just because first of all it's really bulky, but a lot of weight is going to go through that join point. So now I can turn it through and we can see what it looks like. The next step is to turn all of these edges over. So I'm going to go and get my strap and tab, because I actually removed them as mine wasn't getting caught in with the facing. I removed them just to make it easier for me to manipulate this under the sewing machine, but this all needs to turn over or turn under 1 centimeter, and I will pop those in and I'm going to come back and show you what that looks like. You can see I've got the raw edge is turned and the tab is inserted and everything has been clipped in place. It hasn't been sewn, but everything is folded, so the raw edge is on the inside. That's ready to sew, but we don't sew that step yet. The next step, we're going to align the remaining guides. So this one, which will capture in that raw edge, this one. I'm not doing this one because I want to have this pocket for my sketchbook. And then this one, and this will tuck in at the next step. Okay, I'm on the last two. Sewn the other ones on the inside. I haven't sewn around the perimeter yet, that's upcoming. I have pinned this in, but I've filmed a section of that to show you why, and we're almost at the home straight. The eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that I put the wrong tab here. I didn't want this one here, but it will do. Okay, so you can see that we have little bubbles, which is perfect because look, I will now be able to get a perfect pencil in there. I think it also works this side as well. With this, I could get my pencil sharpener in. I haven't sewn this section yet. That's the last step we're going to do. But I can get a palette in here. I can get a sketchbook in here. I'll show you all this at the end. So don't worry about these bubbles. It's perfectly fine. If it was an item of clothing, I'd be like, what are you doing? But this is, we've created it this way in order to allow the fabric to stretch out and hold up to 2, maybe even 3 pencils on occasion. I have got my little pockets here, but again, I'm going to show you those soon. So I've also sewn, I tucked everything in, but I left a bit of ease, as you can see, like my fingers fit in. And then I sewed along the folded edge to just secure everything. Now I kept this right side up because I wanted this to be the really neat, because this is what I'm going to be looking at when I'm using it. I'm not worried what the underside looks like. And you can see that actually my bobbin stitch is a bit crazy. I think that's in part because of the number of layers that it was sewing through. This is where you can see where I've back tacked. I've gone back, forward, down, and then at the where it meets the next layer of slots on the pocket insert, I went back and forwards again. So the underside is scrippy, but to be honest, I don't mind that because I'm not really going to look at it. So the last step, I'm going to sew down here to capture everything in here with this facing up. Then I'll turn it under, I'll turn it over, and I will sew along this perimeter. And that's just to make sure everything is nice and contained. So you can see that the tool roll is finished. I've got the little flap up pocket. The great thing about having the facing here, you don't have to have this is optional. The great thing about having it is you have a line of stitching, and so it actually makes the flap into position better and like hold its place. I did mess up. I was supposed to put the slider here and I ended up putting the circle rings, the O-rings. Never mind. And you can see that it's suitably lovely. I did not get this as straight as I was supposed to, but I'm fine with having a slant because it means different leveled items can fit in there. Yeah, so I'm going to show you how this works. So this is it in its fully closed format. You could hang it actually from a hook in your room, This is the belt version, so this is the one that's designed to be worn around the waist, which is why the strap is as long and why this is in position. If you were just going to make the tabletop version, you wouldn't have a strap this long. And now we can open it up. I've made the strap really long to go around my waist. And here's what it looks like on the inside. So we have these little pocket sections. These were designed with the idea that when you're out and about, if you're going to do drawing or painting outside, normally you have like some kind of tissue or little cloth to wipe your brush on, and you can easily put that in here. I don't know that it would serve much purpose. Maybe with like a little, if you were using this for sewing, maybe what you would do is put your hand sewing needles in. They're not going to fall out. Maybe you could put spool of thread in. What you have to remember is these are going to roll when you roll, so whatever you put in there is going to limit the amount it can roll, if that makes sense. I'd probably be more inclined to put my thread in the pencil case section, which is just a zippered, if I can get it open, so it's just a exposed zipper set into the fabric. This is a waxed cotton with a Liberty ripstop nylon detailing. Then I can put my fabric scissors in here. This is a big pocket because this one I'm actually planning to use for my art out and about, so I can fit a small sketchbook in there, but I'll show that shortly. Put my paper scissors. I could put, it's really hard to do this one-handed, my rotary cutter. Probably want that pointing down so you don't accidentally catch yourself on the blade. I could have put an eraser in there, but there's not enough space now because that's a chunky rotary cutter. The rubber's in there now. Pencils are a given because if you're pattern making, you're going to need pencils. A pen because I like to make notes on my patterns after. These are bubbles, as I've already mentioned during the construction process, to allow them to stretch a bit more so you can fit more items in. As you can see, I could pop my pattern drill here if I can get it in, and then I've got my pattern notches as well, which I could just throw into that big pocket. I've got some mini scissors. Yeah, they fit in. What else have we got? We've got a seam gauge, chunky. I don't think that's going to fit in anywhere, so we'll throw that. Maybe actually we'll put that here. Screwdriver, essential. We've got some marking pencils, fabric marking. That's a handy little ruler. Maybe it's too tall. That one's too tall for it. So that's why there are these slots at different lengths, and that's why the pattern feels a bit complicated to sew, because you have to sew some of these channels to the section. This is the insert, I'm calling it, the pocket insert. So you sew some of these to this, and then you have to flip it and sew the remaining channels so that you're creating the background pockets as well. Got another one here. I don't use all of these. I'm trying to just fill it out to show you. We have a seam ripper. This is my big one, which would have its lid on in normal circumstances. I think that's it, friends. Oh, put in this, but I need a protector so it doesn't destroy the fabric. There you go. So that is how I could use it for my sewing and pattern making tools. I thought I'd just do a side-by-side comparison to the original. So this was the original version I made that's just for the desk only. Or you could put it on the floor outside, that kind of thing. And I filled it with lots and lots of colored pencils from different types. And then my peg and all palette. This is a little bit smaller than I wanted. I still use it, I still love it. It's perfect. The pocketbook was attached in a different way. So I took this design that I had originally created. You can see the flap doesn't stay folded because I don't have a line of stitching there. The facing actually goes all the way down, and so when you're taking things in and out, it quite often gets caught, which is why it evolved into this version. So now I'm going to show you how I'm going to fill this with my art supplies. You'll have to excuse the birds and the freezer in the background. There's nothing I can do about it, and this is the only room I can film in at the moment. With the other one, I've got my peg and all palette. For this one, I'm more likely to be out for a longer period of time, so I'm going to take a palette this size. Again, we're with the one hand situation, friends, sorry. So we can fit that in there. Because these slots are slightly larger, we made them so that they bubble like these ones. It means when something is put in the back, you can still get things in the front. And I will show that to you now. So maybe I want to put in a blending stick. Maybe I want this little pencil for drawing on the go. This is wax cotton, so it's going to stretch out. So even though that feels like it's tight to go in, I'm trying to think what other short things I would put in here. Neo colors. This is going to be really hard to do one-handed. And you can see that there's room. I can push that down further. That might just be that I have a couple of neo colors here. Then something to note is this tray is the standard 15. If you had the 10, that would be smaller, but that will fit in here if you wanted to take out a container of neo colors. Just like I planned it, right? Alternatively, if you're only taking a small sketchbook, I've got this one which will fit in here perfectly, and then that leaves space here for things like pens, and we could put a couple of microns in. I'm just winging this. I've got a whole bunch of supplies in front of me that I'm working from. Maybe I'm going to put my sharpener in here. Sorry that you didn't see that. So this is like a little slot pocket. Maybe I want that, or maybe, see, it's easy to get in and out that way, or maybe I just want to put it in here in the pocket. That is going to fit just, so we're going to put because sometimes I like to use this. Where's the other one that I wanted? This one would also be a fun one for out and about if I've got acrylic paint with me, as is the toothbrush. So you can see I'm actually putting in different supplies to the other one. An eraser. This I designed to have like a little cloth for wiping. I mean, I think I need to cut this one down. Let's see if I can use my elbow to hold things in place. Yeah, I need to cut that down so it fits in there better. But you can put a cloth in there to wipe your brush. I quite like to knock things back with a white Posca. That's always handy to have for paper. Some miniature brushes. Those fit in there nicely. You can fit 2 or 3 in some cases. I'm literally just grabbing stuff. What else have we got that we can put in? Here's a mixture. When these stretch out, and that's how why I've configured it this way, this will hold right now 2. Quite often they stretch out and then you can fit 3 in, especially these ones. 1, 2. You can see there's plenty of movement in there. It will stretch out, so I heartily recommend throwing a 3rd one in. Do it from the middle, not from the stitched section, and there you have it. You have 3 in one pocket, so you could carry 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 pencils if you wanted to, with sketchbook in the back and other supplies. We'll put that in there. Oh, he's gonna fall out there. Maybe I'm gonna put a water brush in there. Okay, so you can see that it's fastened with, I've got O-rings, but you could use D-ring or you could use a buckle, depends on what you want. I just used what I had. So here, if I was right-handed, which I am, and I wasn't holding my phone to record, you can see that I've created the pocket so that the zip goes down. You take out what you need. And then, in theory, if you've got 2 hands, you could zip that back up. But my hand is holding the camera, and I can't do one-handed. And then it just sits across the waist on the tummy, as you can see. So I can access anything that I want. I can easily grab what I need if I need my masking tape, if I need a pencil. Oh, let me get my tool and smush stuff away. I mean, if you're going to go out and about, you probably don't want too much in because you want to be able to get stuff into them quite quickly, into the slots. Got my palette, which I would then attach to my sketching kit, sketch kit. So it's brilliant. I love it. Hopefully you enjoy it too.